Welcome back to Momentous Struggle, a Star Wars Shatterpoint podcast. This week's episode is going to be just a replay of the Will Schick interview from Adepticon 2025 that I had a chance to interview Will right after the reveal. So that Saturday night, after he ran the gauntlet that night, he had, I think, 6 or 7 interviews before he had a chance to get to me. So I really want to thank him for the opportunity to take the time to talk to me, go over everything, and kind of answer some of the general questions I had. I hope this answers some of the questions that you guys may have had from the reveal, and I hope I was able to get some of that information. But we had a blast hanging out at Adepticon. Thanks everyone who came out and watched and watched the live coverage or went back and watched on YouTube. As we start to recover from our trip to Adepticon, I'll start breaking out those YouTube videos so that you can maybe just find the individual match you're looking for or be able to watch them all in order, whatever works for you. But I wanted to get those a little cleaned up so you can have a chance to just pick and choose whatever match you want to watch. But again, I want to give a big shout out to Adepticon and all the people there at Adepticon that allowed us to come out and bring the game to you, as well as Atomic Mass Games for trusting us to really showcase their game. I hope we did them justice because we really love this game, and we hope that we were able to give a little justice to what we think is just an amazing game. But yeah, here we'll go ahead and just jump on into that interview with Mr. Will Schick. All right, once again, I am back with the one and only Mr. Will Schick. How are we doing?
I'm doing great. It's day 3, and I've been going nonstop since like 9 a.m. this morning, so I'm all there. I'm zoned in.
Yeah, 9 hours later, you're completely zoned in?
Oh, yeah, totally. Totally. I can't see. I'm like got the blinders on, and I'm just focused, razor sharp.
Laser focused. All right, well, so we had the reveal. So just so everybody knows, like who might be watching here that might not know who you are.
It's fair.
Can you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell them why everyone should be excited to hear from you?
Oh, okay. I can at least tell you who I am. So I'm Will Schick. I'm the VP of Creative Development and Strategy for.
Whoa!
I know. So I told you I'm laser focused. Strategy for Atomic Mass Games. Hold on. Let me just center myself. Anyway, so my job and my role is to oversee the entirety of the product development and creation process at AMG, which means that I get to work with a ton of incredibly talented people across all the different departments, from dev, sculpting, engineering, graphic design, art, all of that stuff. And so our role is basically to create the fabulous miniature products that come out, and the games and the rules and all of that good stuff. And my role is to kind of drive them all towards the shared vision. I oversee the product development cycle and the product planning and all of that kind of good stuff. And I also get to work very closely with Dev on the design and development of the game rules.
So you're very busy.
I am pretty busy, yeah.
Yep.
But I have some wonderful people who keep me less busy. So
that's fantastic. Yeah, I was talking with Pagani quite a bit about how he's kind of be your right-hand man, really helping you out.
Absolutely.
So that's fantastic. Well, I do have some questions, especially I think most of these are going to be focused on what we saw last night at the reveal. For me, the first thing that was kind of exciting is talking about as a tournament organizer. You know, a lot of people were kind of disappointed because they didn't get a GT. Granted, not everybody's going to get a GT. Right. That is a very large-scale event. You're only going to get so many throughout the year. Yeah, the store kits came out. It seems like that's the answer, like the store kits, the store championship type of kits.
Yeah.
What's the growth on that? Is that like where you're going? Is that the end-all, be-all, or is there more growth that's going to be coming with that?
So, I mean, what we kind of announced last night that I mentioned during the panel is it's the foundation, right? This is the starting point. We were very aware that we had a little bit of some missteps due to various issues in terms of just making sure that organized play was consistent and steady within all the different game lines. And so, unfortunately, due to the way that timelines work and how far out manufacturing and the process goes, by the time we started to correct those, it meant that there was kind of this last year, 2024, where the organized play was pretty weak. It wasn't where we wanted it to be. We weren't getting as many like events out to stores and all of this stuff. The support wasn't quite there, and that's because the issues that we identified were the year before. And so it took effectively a year of rejiggering and refiguring out stuff and pushing forward on a lot of projects at a sprint speed in order to rebuild and reset ourselves for where we are now, which was presented in the roadmap last night. And that is that, at baseline, the first level was we were going to make sure that there are always consistently store tournament/league kits available. And there's going to be 3 of those per year, or 3 per organized play season, effectively. The reason that there's 3 instead of 4 is because we know, just based on analytics and data, that most players don't do events from November to like January, right? There's just too much going on, too many holidays, too many family get-togethers. And instead of doing a kit that would likely undersell or not be utilized, we decided to just take a break on those months and instead focus more effort on 3 kits that cover the time when players are actively involved in events. These are going to be consistent year after year after year, right? So that's going to ensure that no matter what kind of community you have or where you are, if you have that local store that's running events, they can always count on having those 3 kits at those specific times that will rotate out, bring in fresh stuff, allow you to play tournaments, leagues, that kind of thing. And then we are working on the larger store tournament kits, which we talked about a little bit. Those are, like you mentioned, they're a little bit like a GT because the idea is that these are your special events. Mm-hmm. So if the other kits are kind of your baseline, they're the ones you're doing every month or every couple of weeks or however your store wants to go with that, what your community is demanding. These ones are for like, okay, we're going to have a big tournament. We're going to have a big event. We're going to invite the store from across the water to come over, and we're going to have a big throwdown. And we're going to mix and match communities. And these have a bit more substance to them. They're a little bit of a more premium kit. And that's another idea that we're going to be moving forward and building on as we move forward as well. Of course, there's other things that we're looking forward to doing, event kits, bringing in more game modes, like potentially doing some kits that feature key operations or galactic legends or things like that. A way for players to get those materials in full format. Those kinds of ideas are coming a bit later. And then, of course, there's other things that we're looking at as well in trying to build out that program. What kind of weekly store support can we do? What kind of other things can we do? But effectively, we wanted to really present, like, this is our recommitment to where we have kind of been lapsed over the last year. Here's how it's going to work. This is where we're going to start, and we're going to build from there.
And to be fair, I mean, you did have COVID mixed in there.
Yeah.
That kind of puts a little hamper on it. And putting out the new game. So I think that, I, as a tournament organizer, am very thankful that you are putting in the effort and trying to help us grow the community at a local level, not just worrying about the GTs and the bit larger events. And that's fantastic that you're doing that.
Yeah, and I mean, we had the whole, reset to global events with the GTs and all of that happened last year. And so it's a little bit, I would say it's a little bit out of order, but it just is the way the timelines kind of had to work in terms of what we were doing and where we had to go with the program. So we hit the globals first, and now we're really hyper-focused in on the local store level.
That's awesome. So you did mention talking about the Galactic Legends, and I know that they did a lot of beta testing here live.
They did.
How is that going to help with development going forward? Because you did say that you're looking at adding that into some of the kits. So how is the development moving forward since with doing all of those things?
Yeah, so it's been going really well. The beta test that we did for the first half of the characters that were featured, we got some great feedback. We saw a lot of excitement, a lot of really great games. So that is mostly done. We wanted to finish the second half of it, which is the 2 characters and the missions that were being done here. I'm sure that once the devs get back to the office and are able to go through that feedback, they're going to be able to put the final touches on it. I believe, though I'm not confirmed, that the plan is to launch with a couple of special characters as well, like a couple beyond what players have been able to beta test so far. And that should all happen hopefully close to the end of the year.
Nice.
Probably in the fall. And so that will bring that game mode out in print and play format so that players, just like key operations, can download it, can print it, can start playing it, can start exploring all of the different opportunities. And we're going to continue to build on that. And I think, provided that players are continuing to enjoy and really love that format, that opens up the opportunities to do like a special store kit that puts those things into actual print components and add some extra ones to it and have that be run as like a special event. That's not necessarily a tournament or a league, but is a fun come in and game fest kind of day.
Kind of like a one-shot, a game day type of interaction. So I like that. I mean, so that's basically just like for all of you out there, let's definitely get out here, play those games when they start coming out so that we're definitely getting all of that going on and taking care of it. So yeah, I am totally into that. I'm really hoping that the community embraces it, because coming from the other side of the MCP side, those one-shots, those the equivalent of the Galactic Legends are really fun.
Yeah.
And they're really exciting. So I think like people really need to give them a chance and actually put some effort into that for sure.
No, and I mean, I think, again, our goal is always to try to make sure that players' collections and what they have available to them has the most value possible. So finding new ways to play with your miniatures, to experience the game and the Star Wars story and galaxy in different ways that we can do through gameplay and stuff. To us, that's only a positive, right? It's only a net positive, and we'll continue to explore and try different things, and you kind of create these bubbles of people who really love one, or they like the other, or maybe you hit a big one and everybody likes it, and you explore it more. But it's definitely one of those things. It's one of those constant focuses of just maintenance and maintaining the game, in addition to doing your standard like tournament kits, doing your rebalances, doing new releases, all that good stuff.
Yeah, makes total sense. So you bring up rebalances. There's a lot of rebalances that are coming out, and a lot of people are kind of like wondering, when it comes to rebalances, you're doing these, it looks like prior to Mini Stravaganza. A lot of the announcements that were made, basically what this coming changes, I think a lot of people didn't get to see a lot of the reveals that they anticipated to see. Was there any type of anything that was the rebalancing, did that impact that, or is this just kind of the normal minutia of the reveals and where you are in the development process?
The rebalances do have an impact on our bandwidth, right? Because we have to go through, and effectively it's just like a new cycle where you're doing a lot of playtesting, you're doing a lot of looks and things like that. And so you're working on that stuff. So they do have an effect, right? And they do obviously slot into some of the work that might go to a new release or things like that. I think the bigger thing that to remind players and to bring up, as I realize that, this is the first kind of roadmap where players haven't seen a ton of new stuff, a ton of ways forward. Is that we were very upfront at the start that we were going to go really hard, foot full speed on the gas pedal with the game when it launched, to build a really big foundation, and we were very aggressive in terms of even like what a normal product rollout would be. Part of the reason that we did that was because we were very excited about the game, but the other thing is that we only have, even with all of the resources we have through Asmodee and our partners in publishing, we can only produce so many things, right? The manufacturing bandwidth, the factories that can do what we do are few, And so we knew in the plans that we were going to reach this point with Star Wars Legion where we were going to be this big relaunch. It was going to require a lot of the manufacturing bandwidth, all these things, and that was going to pull away from our ability to maybe do some of the other things while we worked through that. And so we kind of logistically planned for, okay, we'll go harder than normal here. That will provide this really robust foundation, this big product line of characters and squad packs and things for people to pull from. And then when it's time to kind of pull the foot off the gas and go to a bit more of like a slower cruising speed, that will happen, but players will still have a lot of toys to explore, a lot of different squads to explore. And ideally, what you'll see is that, yes, the release cadence will slow, right? And things will kind of shift from where they were, but where they were was never sustainable to begin with.
Oh, yeah.
and so this was always kind of part of the process. And when we did our best to try to communicate that, I just kind of bring that up again, but there's definitely this, what's really impacting overall everything is, all of the other things that are going on with the other games, especially with the big Legion launch, has taken up a huge amount of our manufacturing and our production bandwidth. And that also will kind of start to balance out as well, and we'll kind of get back to that equilibrium of everything, and we'll be able to like more steadily like show this is kind of where we are, right?
Yeah, and I think it had to happen on the Legion side. I mean, no, granted, that as Shatterpoint players, we're going to be a little
fair.
jealous.
You can play favorites. It's all right.
We're going to be a little jealous, but I understand it. I mean, especially from someone who was playing Legion when it first came out up until Shatterpoint. because you needed to go to the hard plastic. As a hobbyist, you needed to go to the hard plastic. So it 100% makes sense that this is going to happen. But it's nice to actually hear the reasoning itself.
Absolutely.
So we definitely appreciate all of that. So basically, like looking at, you did also mention the key operations, and possibly getting new missions. What kind of lessons have you learned from the community when it comes to those? Because it seems like there's some people, especially the more competitive focused players, key operations probably might not be made for them to begin with.
Not at all.
And are you looking at maybe trying to focus towards them a little bit more, or keep on the path that you're on right now?
I think our long-term strategy, right, is to try to split the difference. I think, whereas the competitive tournament like gameplay modes and the folks who like to really dive into that, we want to support that and make sure that they have a robust amount of missions to choose from that are balanced for that type of play, and that will keep things engaging and interesting. And I think we have a really good selection of mission packs at this point that go along with it. Key operations, to me, is one of the places where we get to have a lot of fun as the development team, and I think as players, because we can do things that are necessarily imbalanced, right? They're asymmetric, they're narrative, they help us tell the story of Star Wars. And what we saw, especially last year at Adepticon, and even this year, like through the Open Play League events and things like that, the team tournaments, a lot of the community really just wants fun ways to interact with the Star Wars galaxy, to interact with Shatterpoint. And I think Key Operations provides that, and it doesn't really pull away from, those more standard mission packs. Like, those are still in the works. They're not being affected by anything that we're doing with Galactic Legends or Key Operations, right? Those are things that are also tacked on. I mean, you could always argue, well, you could just make more competitive mission packs with that time, but it doesn't really work that way. You can only make so many of those at once due to how they're play tested, how they're worked on, how they're developed, where the resources are going. And so all of these things are additive, right? Nothing subtracts from each other. And I believe that, Key Operations is a really crucial component that some players really gravitate towards. And you see that through like the discussion of like, well, let's just go capture a point, and they want something that's a bit more flashier. They want something that feels more like a Clone Wars episode. And Key Operations is our way to be able to hit that, to be able to allow players to really tell unique stories that feel like those animated episodes that are near and dear to their hearts, while also maintaining the mission packs as a standard thing that continue to advance and evolve the gameplay states within the standard play.
Yeah, and I like that. I mean, there's always ways to grow and innovate when it comes to the game itself. You don't want to just, it's going to get stale if you're just playing the same thing over and over again. So you have to have options. I mean, and everyone has different flavors of what they like. So this is definitely going to add to that. So that kind of, I guess, leads a little bit into the next one. Is you were talking about like design and what you're trying to do. The game's been out for about 2 years now. 2 years since the official launch anyway here at Adepticon. When you're looking at like how the game has grown and everything like that, how has the development process and philosophy changed through these 2 years?
Oh my gosh, we've learned so much, and that's part of the rebalancing effort, right? So like the way in which we analyze and compare units, and what we know now makes for a strong unit versus a weak unit, how we look at abilities, how we look at how characters or units interact with each other, how mission design works a lot in different ways as well, like how far we can push mission design, as people have seen with the craziest mission pack that just got previewed and released. Pushing boundaries on that stuff. I think some of the assumptions we made up front were correct, and some of the assumptions we made up front when we were working on the game before it was released turned out to be a little off the mark. The importance of expertise was definitely one where we've learned a lot about like what an expertise chart needs to be impactful, to be useful, to have a character be considered quote unquote good. Where we were too conservative on some of those. Then a lot of that info goes back into the rebalance. How a tree should work. How much damage can you front load? How many shoves should you front load? Where do you need to like meter out? How impactful are certain conditions? And all of those different things. And I think we're even still learning some stuff about how to best effectively utilize keywords, and where being more specific with keywords is important, or being less specific with keywords is important. How that impacts squad design. And strike team design. I think again, like with all things, we set a board or a game where you can mix and match to your heart's content for the most part. You can make your most random elements, and yet players still kind of gravitate towards, through personal preference and I think through game synergies, these more cohesive thematic teams.
Yes.
And a good example of like where we were too harsh with the tightness of the team and the keywords is like the Inquisitors.
Yeah.
Right? Like they're so insular, you don't really see them because they just don't function anywhere else.
Yeah.
And that compounds with the issues that some of those characters are a little bit under the curve. So of course the Rebalance is looking to address a lot of that, and we've learned how and where to utilize that. Delta Squad, we talked a little bit about them, but I think they're a really great example of how we've started to really understand and learn how to maximize keywords in order to better balance the strength of abilities and do really crazy things, but also have units that can branch out and have more mix and match. So like with Delta Squad, right, most of the abilities on them, they have if you're a clone commando, if you're a clone trooper, you get X. If you're a clone commando, you get Y. And Y is just a better version of X.
Got it.
So now we can have Delta Squad characters mix and match with our clone troopers, and they do pretty good, and they work together synergistically. But also, if you take them just as clone commandos, we now get to see them in all their glory, right? They work better together. They are a squad, this type of stuff. Okay. And so that is obviously something that I think has really come out of the woodwork this year and is, more and more, but will come out with these guys as well and has shifted the focus. So it's a lot of learning, and part of the fun of the job is that it's a craft, right? You're just like a blacksmith or a carpenter or an electrician. Like you just get better at your craft, and the more you learn and the more you do it.
Yeah. So basically kind of like a lot of like what the Bad Batch has, where basically when you if they're clones, they get one thing, or if they're Galactic Republic, they get one thing, but if they're Bad Batch, they're this much better.
You see a little bit of that in the Spectre design too, you know, with the Spectre and then like Spy or Rebel. Although I think we were talking about this separately, but the Crew of the Ghost and kind of their design is very much like you really want to play all of them together all the time. And so maybe they're a little tighter, but I think that works really well for the theme and everything else. So you can spread them out, but you often want a full squad of Spectres to be able to really maximize whoever your primary is, and things like that. So I think there's just a lot of lessons learned, a lot of stuff that people will see in the rebalance that hopefully will kind of reflect some of those things, reflect where the play environment is, reflect where some of the more recent releases are, and bringing up a lot of those previous releases to that level, right?
Yeah, definitely. So when you're looking at, I'm going a little off of script here.
No, go for it.
So when we're looking at the rebalance, what do you think, as the developers, what do you think, like, to give it a taste, what is going to be the most impactful, you think? What are some of the biggest changes and most impactful changes that you feel as someone who's been testing this is going to be?
Oh my gosh. I think like overall, right, one of the biggest parts of the rebalance was supporting units.
Right.
And how supporting units are utilized in the game, what their role is within the game, and then that turned back to their power level. And so a lot of supporting units got touched up. Several of the supporting units got touched down. I think we really struggled initially just based on kind of our initial assumptions versus where the game went after its launch to some of the releases that came later in response to like where people were. We definitely had like kind of a pretty big spread of like power levels in there, and so we learned a lot about that, and I think it's really going to do a good job of, we always talk about balance being a curve, and so weak, strong, and you can make that curve as big, as wide, or as narrow as you want. And we really aim for like a close curve, not a touching curve. But when you look at supporting units at whole, like that curve was really spreading pretty wide.
Yeah.
And so I think by bringing those together, it's going to make players feel like the game is a lot more balanced.
Yeah.
And that there's a lot more opportunities for interesting squad builds, because they won't necessarily have, ideally, if we did the job right, there won't necessarily be the best by a standard mile supporting unit for whichever strike team or squad you're trying to build. You'll have more options. You'll be like, well, this one's really good at this, but this one also is really good at that. And so now I have a choice. And what am I trying to do with that stuff? And I think that's always healthy. What Pagani always says, the number one job a developer has is to make sure that players always have choices.
Yes, definitely want to have choices. So basically what you're doing is you're taking Magna Guard and you're taking the 501st and you're kind of squishing them
together. Yeah. I mean, also looking at like Dark Troopers, Inferno Squad, things like that, right? Like anything that's kind of shifted out of the curve and said, okay, do we need to do something here? Maybe we did, maybe we don't. Looking at, again, a lot of those core set characters and saying, all right, like Anakin Skywalker, he's not quite delivering on the Anakin Skywalker promise. How do we amp him up to make him feel like, he's there? And also with the starter characters especially, there's this interesting thing where that's where players start, right? That's their first buy-in, typically their first characters. You want those starter characters to not feel like completely invalidated right after you start playing the game outside of the starter, right? But starters are the first ones, so often they are usually a little weaker on the curve because you're still learning as a developer. You're still trying to understand what the game is, and you're being a bit conservative with it. And so the rebalances really help us go back and say, all right, these starter characters still have value. They're still very impactful. They're still like the names of names within the Star Wars galaxy that players identify with and want to do stuff.
And I will say, I appreciate that as definitely as a individual that plays the game and getting the starter box, because for some people that isn't a large investment to sit there and buy that game. And now we're sitting there taking the time, you as a developer and as a company, taking the time to actually make those characters still relevant so that I didn't just, spend the money that I'm not using. And so I think that's one of the nice things that we get from the company as a whole, is that you take that into account while we're building the game and playing the game.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we're all, a lot of us at the studio, I mean, the vast majority of us are longtime hobbyists, right? We have armies on our shelves, and we've put countless hours into painting our forces and painting our characters and all of that, and we've all felt the sting of like, I put all this time and effort in, and now I feel like I wasted it because, they nerfed it to the ground, or they completely removed it from the game, or whatever the case may be, right? We've all done those things, or it just doesn't function very well, and it's kind of weak, and I can't make it work. No matter how hard I try, my favorite thing just doesn't quite fit within the game environment. And I think, like for a long time it was, well, wait 5 years, maybe a new edition will come along and it might get better, or it might just disappear entirely. You never knew. It was a crapshoot. Nowadays, with all of the advances in communication and the way in which we can spread information and all of this stuff, print and play accessibility, we're able to really be more dynamic and address these things. But with that great power, there also must come great responsibility, to steal a phrase from a different IP. In that, if you're always going in and trying to fix problems, you never know if they're actually problems, right? Like, you never get a good sense of how to address something. Sometimes you have to let things grow and sit before you say, okay, now I understand what needs to be addressed so that this whole ecosystem can be good. You don't want to trample on it. And so there's a bit of like, we can do it, but we also need to wait. And that's where you really get the yin and yang of Pagani and I, because I'm more of a we can do it, and he's more of a we should wait guy. And so between the two of us, we usually find that right timing. And in the between time, all of the developers on the team just kind of look at their dinner and say, Mommy and Daddy are fighting. So we just won't look up until they're done. But it's good. It's good. It's always about kind of finding that balance and everything. And so if characters that, aren't in the rebalance this time in May, you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they missed this or whatever. We did only look at the first 12 months. We like to give the soup a long time to simmer, as I like to say, before we go in and start to figure things out. So there's a possibility that like closer releases to where we are now just weren't part of that process. And they'll wind up in something that comes later, in the next 18 months or something like that. We usually go about an 18-month to a 2-year cycle based on release. So that typically gives us enough time to identify and do proper testing and then have it come out. So again, if it's like I don't know, well, I'll just pick one that just came out. If it's the Kit Fisto from Requesting Your Surrender, you're like, he just needs fixes, he needs rebalances. It's going to be a little bit, right? We're not going to immediately address it unless something is doing something that is breaking the game experience and environment. we're going to wait and we're going to collect data. We're going to see how things shake out, because a lot of times some things come in strong because players don't yet know how to beat it.
Right.
And they have to figure that out. And that's part of the joy of these games, is you get to problem solve your way through those things. Sometimes, they don't quite hit, but maybe something else later will make them hit, so you want to wait and give it time to see if players will come around to it. And then once you hit that certain point where you're pretty confident in your data set, you feel like you understand what's going on with the environment, that's at the point where you feel pretty comfortable going in and saying, okay, let's make some adjustments, let's have some discussions about rebalances, let's see where they're at. And then you give yourself ample time to test them to make sure that they don't break anything further, and then you get to drop them on people and bring some new life back into some older releases.
No, it makes sense. So just to maybe clarify, if you can, the MCP side, that you did say there was a hinting that this is going to be an every year thing with the rebalance. That game's been out for 6-7 years now.
Yeah.
That there's a lot of rebalancing that can happen, things along those lines. Looking at Shatterpoint, we haven't been out long enough to where I think a rebalance every year is necessary. So you're probably looking at a little bit more of an extended time between the rebalances.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can kind of look at it from, if you use Crisis Protocol as kind of a historical marker, right? We did our first rebalance for that game about 2 years in. We did another one a little bit after that. So there was about 18 months in between those different things. I guess we did our first rebalance about 12 months in, so about a year after. And then the next one was about 18 months after that. So there's a little bit of space between them, right? Because you want to give time to see how things go and everything like that. So Shatterpoint definitely would be a little slower to start, but as the field increases, if we determine that we need to kind of amp that up and start taking a look at rebalances, as more and more variables are entered into the equation, there's more and more things that can get you or go differently or be addressed. And then with Crisis Protocol specifically, one of the things that we were talking about was, because of all the repacks and the reissues, we're able to kind of it's a temporary speed up, sort of, because what we're doing is we're going through and we're just addressing rebalances and characters as we're repacking them, because there's a whole layout process that goes along with it. So it is a little bit outside of the norm of what we would normally be doing, but it was an opportunity afforded to us based on the fact that we're moving that product into multilingual like Shatterpoint has been.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense to that. So, I mean, I know as far as questions that I came up with, preparing this, there was one last question that a lot of people had in regards to interactions in the game.
Okay.
So when we look at in Legion, there's some times where they can interact with a vehicle.
Yep.
In MCP, there's certain things. So Ultron, Ultimate Encounter, you can go into the building and rescue someone.
Right.
Are we looking? Is there a possibility of some sort of interaction with game components other than objective markers and other characters in the game? Is there a possibility of some sort of other interactions that might happen with the game going forward?
I think potentially, right? So we've been constantly looking at where can we push the mission objectives and see where things go. This is part of the key operations joy, is that you can do things like that, right? I can have you go attack a shield generator and try to start a chain reaction. And it works because the mission itself is asymmetrical, so I don't have to necessarily, as a developer, right, provide a balanced experience where both players are coming to the table with a largely equal chance to win. So with key operations, the balance might be 60-40, right? In a normal mission pack, our goal is always to say, if two players of equal skill with equally built lists come to the table, it's a 50-50. And then as the player skill changes, the percentages change slightly, but the mission is not necessarily itself hugely a determinant factor until you plug in things like, hey, I took a strike team that really maximizes this layout, or it maximizes what this mission's going to do. And at that point, you're like, okay, great, you're playing turn 0 well. You're going to get a couple percentage points in your favor because you're optimizing. But it shouldn't be a 60, 70, 80% kind of deterministic factor. One of the challenges that we've had with Shatterpoint in general since the start of the game has been, anytime we put a victory point asset in somebody's hand, movement in the game is so fast that it's very difficult to stop that person from just going to the corner or avoiding everything and just scoring, right?
Right.
And we tried a lot of different things at the start to ameliorate that. to stop that from being a case. I think there are still places that we can go as we learn more and more about the game. But as far as like the general mission packs for the standard game experience, I don't know that we're there yet. We've explored other things like, with the new mission pack, the ability to swap the active objectives and things like that by drawing new cards. And of course we have like the different abilities that come out with different cards, like the Shatterpoint. When you draw a Shatterpoint card, you can press your luck and do the chance things and all that from the different packs, all those different abilities. Will we see like an interact with things? I don't know. In the standard mission, we haven't figured it out yet. It doesn't mean that we haven't stopped trying, but thus far, our results have been that it really skews the game in a not fun way.
Yeah.
And that obviously is something that we're just not going to be happy with putting out into the world. So it's difficult to say. Like, did we write ourselves into a box based on how everything else in the game interacts in a way that we really enjoy, and we missed out on this potential? And maybe that's just a fundamental like reality of the situation. It might be. I'm usually pretty optimistic about being able to problem solve your way out of anything with some creativity and innovation. I don't know what that is yet because we haven't quite gotten there, but know that we're working on it.
Oh yeah, no, and I don't think that there's, me personally, especially because I played MCP since launch.
Yeah.
I personally don't think that the game needs to have some sort of extra component
Sure.
where you have to pick up, walk away with, and interact with. People that have not played the MCP and like came in, like Aubrey, who just came in to this game as their first miniatures game, feels like that would be a fun way to do it. But it's like, at the same time, I'm kind of in the same boat as you, where I don't know if that's the right fit for this game. There are different dynamics here. Like in that game, the terrain is very different. Terrain is very impactful here. How is that going to interact? How is the interactions with the characters with the terrain going to impact how you move around and with this movable object in the game that someone is carrying? And I think that's going to be a bigger problem with it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that we've actually explored a couple of ideas in our multiplayer. So another thing that we're working on is introducing a multiplayer experiences as well, beyond just the Galactic Legends. The Galactic Legends 2v1. We've played and have been having some fun with the new free-for-all multiplayer variant where effectively everyone just takes primary characters and then it's just murder.
Nice.
It's like it's just PvP, murder ball, and it's zany but it's fun. Like maybe there's a world in which there's like one of those classic Overwatch missions where you have to like escort the train, right? And the train moves a certain amount, and that happens. Maybe that's the kind of interaction thing that could work in a standard game. I don't, it's possible. We haven't tried it. We've discussed a little bit about it, but like at the end of the day, we're always trying to figure out new and cool ways to approach gameplay, to bring new problems for players to solve, to bring new strategies to the game. Not just because they're fun for players, but also because the more kind of variables, the more kind of ways to interact with things that you have, the more diverse the character selection can be, because we do build characters that excel at certain aspects of the game. You can excel at murder, you can excel at ranged combat, you can excel at control, you might excel at support in various ways. If the mission can help, again, push those kinds of squad choices to be beneficial, to be optimal, that's great. The more options you have, the more variety in strike teams and character selection players have as well. Okay.
So you piqued my interest a little bit with this murder ball, with with the primaries. Can you share any more about this?
I mean, it kind of that's kind of all there is to say. Like it sells itself, really.
It does.
No, so we've been looking at one of the things that players always enjoy is kind of like a side game, or you're with your friends and you don't want to play a normal game, and there's like 3 or 4 of you, and you're just like, man, I wish we could just all play together tonight, right? I wish we could just like do something a little off the wall. You can play multiplayer just in the standard game, right? You can split your squads between 2 players and play team battles and things like that. And I think that's great, and I've certainly done it. I've seen players do it. But, we wanted to really see if we could give some game modes that were like 4 people, right? That were more than 2, and what would that look like? Galactic Legends was 1, but we also wanted to look at like these more crazy free-for-alls. So the first idea was, well, what about a deathmatch arena, right? Like what if what if we just took like the famous Battlefront mode where everybody gets to be a Jedi or a character and you just run around and it's just murder all the time.
Sounds good.
What does that look like, and how does that work? And so we've worked on that one, and effectively, it's not particularly balanced because once you add in more than 2 people, it's pretty hard to do it. So like there's kill stealing and there's there's backstabbing and there's alliances. There's a lot of table play, which I think is what makes those modes the most fun.
Sounds like a fun.
So there's that one, and then we did something that was less focused on the zaniness, but more like everybody gets a squad, and so each person can play a squad, and you play a 4-player game. And there's some rules that try to smooth over the idea that like everyone can gang up on one player and things like that. The idea that like only the player to your left is your target, so like you only score points when something happens to the player to your left, and the player to your right is obviously going after you, and so you get these weird dynamics where like it's like, okay, I want to get them. You don't care about them, so you're probably going to ignore them, but they're trying to get you, so you might get them back. And it creates a pretty interesting, again, an above-the-table kind of game where you have a lot of diplomacy, and like the person like kitty corner to you is kind of your ally because you're not really engaging with each other, but they can both affect the person who's trying to chase you, and those kinds of things. And again, like just fun different modes that we can put in that have good rules that allow players and communities to come together and play the game in different ways.
Yeah, I mean, because a lot of people don't play this game in stores. Maybe there's playing it at home, and like now you have a way for the family to sit together and play a unique way to play Star Wars.
Well, and I mean, even within the game store environment, right? Like sometimes when you have a new player who's like, "Oh, what's this game about?" Just doing, primary murder ball is like a great way to introduce them to some of the core concepts in a really fun way.
Exactly.
Because in that mode you respawn, so like you're never dead. You go in, you die, you come back. Just like a video game environment. So you can really get the sense of like, okay, this is how movement works, this is how force works, this is how attacks work, this is how the tree works, those kinds of things in a less like full environment and a much more focused environment that also still doesn't like skimp on the fun.
Yeah, sounds great. So I'm going to sit there and probably end this a little early because you are running around like crazy.
That's fair.
You are running around like crazy doing a lot of interviews. I think you deserve a little bit of a break. I think you do. You answered all the questions that I think I had. I appreciate you coming on very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks for everything you do. Thanks for streaming all the games this week. It's been wonderful to be able to catch some of them and see the action going on. So I appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you again.
Yeah, I look forward to being back, hanging out with you guys again, and seeing you in the future.
All right. Thanks so much, sir.
Thank you very much. I almost talked to you.
There you go. Hey.
Will Schick, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.